Hello and welcome to the On It Not In It interview series podcast. I'm your host, Todd Eppert, and today I'm joined by Mark Wise, who's the owner and CEO of Columbus Eagles FC. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. Would you like to kick us off with a brief background as to who you are and what you do?
Okay, well, I'm a guy that's been in business for over 47 years in the IT business, and loved that time during that phase of my life, and it continues. But in recent years, I have been passionate about the world of women's soccer, from youth all the way up to the national team and the professional leagues. And so, I mean, I'm an IT guy by trade, and I am a soccer guy by passion. I guess I'd say it that way.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and we talked a little bit about beforehand about what we're going to talk about in the podcast. And I love the story of the women's soccer program. So let's talk about that. So what was the kind of spark that led you to not just be in a women's soccer, but to start a business around that and be an entrepreneur in that space?
Well, that actually is a very long story, and I always tell people I try to give you the short version. I fell in love with the game because my youngest daughter was playing, and they needed a volunteer coach for a recreational program, and that humble beginning took me down a path where I got my coach's license. I have a USSFB license, a advanced national diploma in coaching, and I coach high school women's soccer, and I coach club soccer for over 26 years now. But I fell in love with what they call the 99ers, the Julie Foudys and the Mia Hamms and whatever, when they were playing the 1999 World Cup, Women's World Cup. And I took my family, for whatever reason. I keep telling them, from a marketing point of view, somebody sent me a postcard that I read, and it convinced me to take my entire family to Chicago for a weekend to watch women's soccer. And I said, nowadays, I would love to know what they said so I could duplicate that to get more fans in my. I went to watch that game, and we were in a traffic jam in Chicago, and I realized we were in a traffic jam because of all the fans coming to watch women play soccer. And I got into the state Soldiers Field, I think it is there in Chicago. 70,000 people were watching women play from Africa and Brazil and whatever, and it was exciting and wonderful experience. They announced that they were going to have a professional women's soccer group the following year, and I got all excited. They're going to come to Columbus, put a franchise there, and they didn't. And that endeavor only lasted about 3 years. And as a business guy, I was looking at their business model saying, you're doing it all wrong. This is not right. You're expecting 15,000 people to come to the stands, and you haven't paid your dues yet. You have to build the thing. But they had assumed they were going to get TV coverage and a lot of fans, and they didn't, so it failed. So a few years later, they started up the WPS, the second go around of women's professional soccer. And I said, certainly they're going to come into Columbus, and they did not come into Columbus. And I look at their business model. It was scaled down a bit. They didn't expect a huge amount of TV coverage, and they didn't expect 15,000 fans, but they still expected 7,500 fans. And I said, come on, guys, you're not thinking this through. They typically think of it in soccer terms, and they forget to think about the business model underneath it, in my opinion. But that second go around failed. They came up the third time, and they created the NWSL, and it has a much better structure, a more business potential structure. It had a potential to grow, but they still passed over Columbus. And I was complaining to a friend of mine at a soccer convention, why are they missing Columbus, and how come they never bring one to Columbus? And he said, well, why don't you do something about it, Mark? And I remember telling some of my players in my teams along the way that sometimes, first of all, you got to dream big dreams. And second, sometimes it's got to be about you doing something. It's a team sport, but sometimes you have to step up. And those words slapped me in the face and said, okay, they didn't bring us the team to Columbus. What are you going to do about it, Mark? And so that's when I borrowed the money, started the Columbus Eagles as a semi-pro or a amateur team with the objective of creating a good business model that could make money. Because everybody always told me, you know, if you want to make $1 million in a sports business, invest 10. And it's like, I want to put together a business model where we can make money at this and show people that there's a market here, that there's a way to draw fans and sponsors and everything to Columbus. And if I could do that, it would draw the attention or help me bring professional women's soccer to Columbus. So that's our mission where we're at now. And there's been an awful lot of stuff I've learned along the way about the business of soccer or sports franchises that I tell you, it's a different world. I have consulted in my IT side. I've been consulted with various manufacturers, distributors, retailers, and put software together to manage their businesses and consulted with them there. Sports is so much different. Sports marketing, the whole concept is so much different. But I do still believe that there are, if you apply business principles to that particular endeavor, that you can be successful at it. You can make it work. I've often looked and said, there seems to be two people in the world in the soccer side, those that are soccer people, but they're not business people, or people that are business people that don't know anything about soccer. And I'm hoping that my experience, because I've been in business and I know soccer, that my combination will help me be successful in what I'm doing here.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Mark, thank you so much for that answer. It actually gives me a lot of ways to pivot questions for you off of it. So what I heard you talking about there was you got to have more than just a passion for something. You got to have a business mind, right? It sounds like you also learned a lot watching other people fail in the soccer world. You got to have a realistic expectation, right? So you got to build a realistic model, and that's what you're trying to do with your program in Columbus, which is awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that. You also said that you learned a lot along the way. So I know it's been 10 years, but what are some common misconceptions that you bumped into early on that you thought, oh, this is how it's going to be, and then you're like, whoops, way wrong?
Well, the very first one I'd share with you is that what I think about the market and what I think about women's soccer is not necessarily what the rest of the world thinks about it. My first mistake was I really believed that there were soccer enthusiasts like me, that all I had to do is say, hey, I'm starting a women's soccer team in Columbus, and I would get a flock of people that would say, great, I want to come and watch. And the fact is, that's just not the case. I knew very little about marketing, other than a couple social tweets at the time, or sending out some emails to all the local clubs and say, hey, I got this stuff going on. It's a whole lot more difficult than that to get a person's attention today with all of the noise that they've got and all of the different opportunities. You got your direct competition with other sports teams, but then you got your indirect competition from all sorts of other activities that people could be doing. So you think I'm the only women's soccer team in town. They have to come to me, right? It's like, no, they got a men's soccer team. They got amateur soccer. They've got youth soccer on the soccer side, but then they got OSU football is a huge thing. They got NHL hockey. They've got the Clippers minor league baseball team. There's all those guys that are indirect competitors with me, direct and indirect, basically. Then I said, oh no, now I've got to create a marketing department. I have to find some way to reach these people. And even, I'm an IT guy. But these handheld, Twitter, X nowadays, Instagram, whatever, I'm not a big guy. I don't use them. They're just not my thing. It's my age, I'm sure. My kids use it. My grandkids use it. But I pick it up and read one headline, move on. I don't spend 2 hours a day on these things. But that's where my market was. And so I had to learn Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and what their purposes are and what's the best way to use them and all that stuff. I was lucky that I had several people along the way that volunteered that were more expert in that area and gave me on the job education of here are the tools, Mark. And then I could bring an idea of what my message wanted to be and how I wanted to get there. And they would help me package it and get it out. And so we do have, in the Eagles, we have a fairly for our size and our market, a fairly good following on Facebook and X and Instagram, and we have a pretty good email list now, and all those kind of things. Compared to our peers, we are doing great in that area. But that's been a long haul.
Got it. Got it. Yeah. So another great lesson for our listeners. And I'll summarize what you just said. It's, man, just because you open the doors to your business doesn't mean there's a line outside waiting to get your business, right? And more importantly, you had to learn where your prospects, your customers were, and take on a completely different technology. I'm the same as you, by the way. I don't do that whole, I struggle with that stuff and have gotten through it, but you had to go meet the people that were going to become your customers where they were shopping, which was Instagram and places that you didn't typically spend time, which is great. So awesome. So you've been at this now 10 years. So congratulations. So it's not something that you started and you're, flash in the pan and I've just got started. 10 years is a good time to survive, especially in a difficult marketplace like women's soccer. So what are your challenges today?
Today is finding enough capital and identifying the key areas to spend it. It really comes back a bit to that marketing side, is that I talk to marketing people, and if you talk to 5 different marketing people, you get 5 different answers of where you should be and what you should be doing. They all want more money, but it's kind of like, well, what's the appropriate amount of money to spend to get your brand out there, people aware of your brand, plus also buying your stuff, your merchandise, your tickets, your sponsorships, or your season tickets and all that. So bringing in enough capital to cover all the needs in there, but then also prioritizing that capital spend to make sure that it is going in the right place at the right time. I always say, if I'm a bigger place and I got a lot of resources, I can make a lot of mistakes and recover. When you're a small business, every decision is almost like life critical. If I make this misstep, it could put me out of business. So it's very critical to be able to search for the proper sources of capital, making sure that you're budgeting things in the right areas that will give you the maximum return on that investment. And then finding the right people that can come alongside and help you out in the areas that you're not very strong.
Oh, so you mean people and money are important in small business?
Yeah, we try to eliminate the people as much as possible with automation and all that, but there are certain stuff that you just, I mean, the new thing with the AI coming on, they're saying, oh, you don't have to have a writer do this, and you don't have to have the video guys do that. Just do it at chat GPT. And I go, I have tried that. You put some things in there, and I can almost, when somebody sends me an email proposing something to me, I can tell you it was written by AI rather than a person. Because there's certain things that you catch that are human characteristics in writing that the AI hasn't done yet. And maybe they will one day. But yeah, people are important. People that can buy into your vision and can maybe latch on to your passion and reflect that. That's great. And then having the capital will be able to keep them happy and working.
Yeah, so you've been in business 10 years. You talked about the 99ers. So 25 years ago, U.S. women's soccer lit the U.S. soccer women's programs on fire in this country, right? Because they were so exciting to watch back in 99. So, but a lot has changed. The business environment's constantly evolving. So how do you stay innovative in the soccer world?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a good question. Always have to be looking for things that will differentiate you. For an example, I'll share this because I don't have the resources to make it happen. Maybe I throw it out there. Somebody says, hey, I can do that for you. You've got live stream where you put your game out there in front of people so they can watch the game. Well, traditionally, you have a director controlled environment where you have the director maybe has 3 or 4 screens, 3 or 4 cameras coming in, and he makes a decision on, I want to see a tight shot on this guy, or I want to see the entire field and all that. Well, I say in today's technology, why not turn on all 4 of those cameras and let the people at home choose which camera they want to watch? So if you had an app at home that you could say, I want to watch all 4 angles, or I want to zoom in on this guy, or, oh, I missed that play because I went to get a lunch. I want to back up, just grab the slider and slide back and say, let me see that goal again. Not be in the control of the producer, but have it be in the control of the consumer, which is right in line with everything else that we're giving them, everybody their choices on how their screen looks and what colors things are going to be and what font they want to see and all that. It's all user controlled. So why not just give the raw feed out there and let them go? I played in stadiums that did not have, I didn't have access to scoreboards and video boards. So I thought, well, why not have an app where you had the video board was actually on the app. So people could be watching the game live, but they could be also checking out the video board, and they could hit some buttons and see something about the players or the opposite team or whatever. So you have them sitting there messing with their phones, but paying attention to your game, not checking somebody else's game and whatever while they're doing it. But those kind of innovations are kind of things that you got to think about and consider and say, well, what's the investment worth, and can I roll it out? And if I did it, could I sell it to somebody else? All that kind of stuff. If you just put out a product just like everybody else, you're not differentiating yourself in some way, it's really hard to sell today.
Yeah, excellent. That's great there, and I love that idea. By the way, if one of our listeners is out there that has a nice big blank checkbook that they could write Mark a check to make that happen, I think we would all really love that. Whether it's college football, pro football, women's soccer, or whatever you're watching, I think that would be fantastic to be able to select the view that you want. So great idea. Someday that'll be like the norm, and we'll be like, well, this was first on the podcast with Mark.
There you go. You heard it here first.
Right. So could you well, we've been talking about the past a lot. So can you give us a future vision for what you've got? What's coming next in your world at Columbus Eagles?
Well, I certainly hope that Columbus will be the home of professional women's soccer at some point. And I hope that I will have had some part in making that happen. From the Eagles' perspective, I have to speak just a little bit about the state of the women's game in the U.S. We may be a world leader in the women's side of the game, but there's still a whole lot of work to do in that side. On the men's side of the game, you have like 4 or 5 different levels of play. You've got the MLS on the top, and then you've got some second division, third division, and then you've got some lower division, 2 or 3 divisions that are like the WPSL, a pro-am. On the women's side, you really just have the NWSL as the pro, and then you have this amateur league, and that's it. I would really love to see those tiers fill in for the women, that there's more opportunity at every different level. And I feel like the world is moving that way. If you start looking at the metrics for women's sports in general and women's soccer in particular, they are rising. The question that they always had was why couldn't you find women on TV, women's sports on TV? And the TV execs were saying, well, there's no audience. And then it was like, well, you can't get an audience unless you put it on TV. And so in the pandemic, when the NWSL was the first league to come back and play, all the network guys said, oh, we got to go show this because that's the only thing in town. Well, when they did that, what happened? Their numbers were huge. And they started to realize that, oh my goodness, if we put them on, people will watch. And so that has started that and a whole lot of other factors have started to show that women's sports is on the rise worldwide. Women's soccer is on the rise. You look at some of the valuations of the NWSL team. 4 or 5 years ago, they were $1 million, $2 million to buy an expansion. The last 2 expansions were $53 million. And some of the valuations of some of these clubs are over $100 million now. So just in a period of 10 years, there's a huge growth there. So we hope in the Eagles to provide that bridge between, some of our players would come play for us for a while and maybe they decide to go pro. Maybe we develop some players and they can go out of here and go pro. But we at least will continue to provide an avenue for the best why don't we say the best value entertainment in sports value in Columbus. For our price point versus our benefit to the consumer is just tremendous. So we're going to get that out there and keep growing our fan base and keep growing our stuff and hope to push the top level even higher.
Awesome. Awesome. So one final question for you, Mark, and I'm going to ask you to take your soccer hat off of for this one, because this is just going to be my final is what you've been in business for 47 years. You run a successful IT company. You run a successful soccer franchise. What advice would you offer to aspiring entrepreneurs who are just getting started right now?
First of all, I'd say do it. The greatest way to fail is to never start. So if you have an idea, if you have a passion that you say, I want to get there, I want you to do it. We have too few people going out and starting new stuff. They're too timid. They're too afraid, whatever it is, just do it. I remember when I first got started with Alpha 2 years ago, I bought a book that says how to make your first $1 million. And the first page said, well, take $1,000. And I then said, I need a second book. I need a second book that says, how do you get your first $1,000? I didn't come from a background where I had, money to start with. My businesses started with zero investment. It was time. And that's something that you can do if you're willing to, eat the McDonald's 2 or 3 times a week, whatever, and stay in a small 1-room house or whatever. Minimize your expenses, find a way to get it out there, spend your time. You can invest sweat equity and make it happen. But first point of advice is do it. Second is really sit down and work on a realistic budget, and don't kid yourself. I put my first budget together and the numbers did not work. Everything was negative on the bottom line. So what did I do? I started increasing the sales figures until, hey, now it works. But I was honest about the revenue when I started, but I was moving it up to make it work, and they were not doable numbers at that time. So you need to put the budget together, make sure you have either the time that you can spend to be the time equals money capital, or the money available to make it happen, and that you're being honest with yourself in terms of your revenue and your expenses. But then just get out there and do it, make it happen. And remember this, the one thing I remember, I failed in my first business. And then I felt like that was just the end of the world. But Andrew Carnegie failed 3 businesses before he was successful. So do not let failure stop you either. If you get out there, you try it and it didn't work, it's get up and do it again. And I forget the saying somebody said, you're not measured by the number of times that you fall down, but how many times you rise up to try again.
Yeah.
So don't let failure stop you either. Just if this is your thing to go out and make something new, just keep doing it. I also go by, there's a poem that talks about, I took the path least traveled by, and it made all the difference. Being in business, being my own thing, making my own path. I would say it's been a tough life, but man, is it worth it at the end? And you say all the experiences I've had and the things I've learned that I would never have learned if I took a 9-to-5 job working for somebody else.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the just do it. And I know I'm not stealing that from Nike or anything like that, but I love the mentality of just get out and do it. And I also like the story about Andrew Carnegie. One of my favorite stories is the Thomas Edison story about when he was asked, what does it feel like to fail 999 times making a light bulb? And he said, I didn't fail 999 times. I learned 999 ways not to make a light bulb, right? Just keep going at it. So I love it. Well done, Mark. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. We really appreciate your time. It's a great podcast, a lot of wisdom drops. And I know a lot of folks are passionate about sports and soccer. So I think this will really resonate with people. Great meeting you and learning more about your entrepreneurial journey. To everyone watching, I look forward to seeing and listening to your podcast in the next couple of episodes. Thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too.